were pinned to it. And to my left, that was what made me nearly pass out then and there. A yellowed, dingy mattress sat in the corner. On top of it lay a corpse. Maggots writhing in and out of every emaciated orifice. Its eyes were wide open, and its mouth had stiffened into a permanent scream. I took a step back as the putrid stench assaulted my nose. But just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, a sound from behind me made me freeze. Click. I slowly turned around to find my grandfather standing there, a six-shooter trained on me. Pappy, I thought you were at the store, I squeaked, my voice weak and brittle. Forgot my wallet. He scowled at me, delivering the most hateful glare that I have ever seen in my life. He sighed, breaking the silence permeating between us. You've seen too much, boy. I didn't want it to come to this, but you've left me with no choice. Bang. A deafening gunshot ripped through the air. For a moment, I didn't feel a thing. The adrenaline surging through my system made sure of that. But when I looked down, I came to the sickening realization that my arm was blossoming with red. Arnold, what was that? Grandma shouted from upstairs. Nothing. Ignore it. To my shock, she didn't reply. How much did she know? Your grandmother's gonna be very upset when she finds out, Pappy said, pointing the gun to me again and cocking the hammer. But she'll get over it. Eventually. I didn't give him the satisfaction. I couldn't. My fight or flight response kicked in just at the right time. I bolted forward, the sound of the bullet whizzing past my temple, ringing in my ear as I went. I shoved my grandfather, and he stumbled, dropping the gun. I didn't stop. I leapt up the stairs, darted into the foyer, and swiped Pappy's spare set of keys from the hook. I heard his pounding footsteps pursuing me as I made a mad dash for his truck. Get back here! The sound of his voice, booming from the depths of the basement, only made me run faster. I crashed outside, unlocked the truck, and threw myself in the driver's seat. Pappy appeared in the doorway as I threw the vehicle into drive. Crash. I instinctively ducked my head as the left side mirror shattered. Pappy didn't try to shoot me again. He stood there as I floored it down the dirt road and far away from that house. I kept driving until I reached the nearest town. Fortunately, the bullet had only grazed me, so I wasn't in need of immediate medical attention. The police investigated my grandparents' house. What they found haunts me to this day. The bodies of my grandparents were recovered from the home. After a thorough investigation, my grandfather's crimes were made public. Aside from my pappy and my grandmother, he was linked to the disappearances of 13 people, and it's thought that he could have had more victims. I had to attend therapy for years afterward just to feel normal again. Now, all this time later, I'm just thankful that I made it out that house alive. 3 Days in the Dark, written by Saturdead. When I was 8 years old, my brother Elliot went missing. He was just 13 years old, but older siblings have this aspirational quality to them. He just didn't come home one day. They looked for days, but couldn't find any trace of him. I was too young to understand what was going on, so I had to sit in my room and play with my Legos, hoping there'd be a knock on the door telling me that things would be okay. There never was that kind of knock. They didn't find him. As days turned to weeks, the search party stopped. But even after everyone went home, I was still out looking for him. I'd take the long road home from school. I'd go down paths I hadn't checked. I had a crumpled up map in my pocket with circles around places that I knew he liked, and I was hell-bent on checking them all. People don't just disappear. It doesn't work like that. But after a while, there were no places left to check, no circles left to draw, and Elliot was still gone. Last thing he said to me was, "Later, Gator." I don't think you ever truly come to terms with something like that. Once you've run into an impossible question, you look for answers in everything. I got really into puzzles and brain teasers. Not because it was fun, but because leaving unsolved mysteries could give me this immense sense of dread. I was a great student and one of the top contenders in the debate club. Again, not because I enjoyed it, but because I hated not knowing. When I got a little older, I started volunteering for search and rescue parties. I'd made myself known with local law enforcement and informed them that I'd gladly volunteer. I figured if I couldn't find Elliot, perhaps finding someone else's missing brother or sister was the second best thing. At the very least, it could help me sleep at night. I know there's a lot of people saying, "Get over it," but you can only get over it so much. I'm in my early 30s now. You can forget their face and the hopes you had growing up, but you can't forget the impact they had on you. You can't forget your own lived experience and the damage those years of uncertainty have left. Even if I never were to hear the name Elliot again, I can never forget the feeling of having the trajectory of my life take a sudden left turn. I'd like to talk about a search party I signed up for a couple of years back. At that time, I'd been a part of dozens of organized searches. I knew some of the people involved, and I was familiar with the gear. I got there early, taking some time off work. I put on the high visibility vest, the gloves, and got the backpack. Radio, water, flashlight, a couple of chocolate bars, a first aid kit, and a waterproof bag. Now, I never found someone on a search like that, but that didn't mean I never would. You must believe in the best case scenario. We weren't handed a GPS, which surprised me. Turns out we were going underground. So we were handed these filtration masks to protect us from harmful dust and dead air. The missing person was a 17-year-old urban explorer. I live in a city with a metro system, and he'd been exploring an abandoned station on the outskirts of town. The family had been notified of a social media post pointing at the approximate location, but the details were sketchy. To help with the search, power had been restored to this part of the tunnel. Most of the emergency lights were meant to last for years, so there shouldn't be too much of a problem getting around. We were assigned into sections and teams. We were instructed to only follow lit up corridors and hallways. However, as parts of the station had been abandoned mid-construction, there would be dark sections that were unfinished. If we found such an area, we were ordered to call it in and ask for further instructions. And with that, we were on. I was a bit miffed about not getting to see the abandoned station platform. That thing was supposed to be huge. Instead, I was assigned to one of the maintenance tunnels. It was originally meant to be house heating pipes, but the pipes were never added. Instead, there were these lines across the wall and the occasional holes in the ceiling. You could tell they must have been surprised about the project shutting down. I found a whole toolbox abandoned by a half-mounted door. There were some personal items still in it. I was in a team of 4 people. We went down the hall slowly and methodically, calling out to the missing person as we went. We stuck to our side of the search and kept in radio contact with the organizer. It was hard to see what all the spaces were supposed to be, as we'd occasionally come across entire rooms with little to nothing in them. It made it hard to explain what we checked, as we couldn't accurately describe what was what. Was this supposed to be a control room or some kind of plumbing junction? Where on the map exactly was this supposed to be? We came to an unusually long corridor that split off in 3 directions. While staying within earshot, we decided to split up. I got all the way to the end of the hallway, where I stopped by a heavy door. The thing was almost solid black and as heavy as cast iron. I got the impression that it was some kind of security door, maybe leading to an underground bomb shelter. I called out to the others in my team, but didn't get a response. I called it in on the radio as I wrestled with the door. It was pitch black inside. The lights were out. I'm looking at the dark room at the end of the hallway. See, I think? The one on the right, second right, past the boilers? Just stay within radio contact and leave the door open. The operator responded. Don't go so far you can't see the light. Got it. I entered the room. The room was a little smaller than the hallway, tickling the top of my head when I stood upright. If I balanced on my toes, I could feel the strap from the mask touch the ceiling. I tried to figure out what the space was meant for, but I couldn't make sense of it. There was only one entry point, and there were no holes in the wall for cable management or ventilation. This was completely isolated. I tapped the radio again, swaying my flashlight back and forth. There's a corridor going deeper, I said. Is someone watching my back? Yeah, there's someone right outside, the operator assured me. You go on ahead. I took a couple of steps further, shining my flashlight down the hall. The light couldn't reach the end of it. It was such a long tunnel that it triggered my sense of vertigo. Like for a split second, it was sucking me in. I had this uncomfortable thought that maybe this was the feeling of going missing. Facing this endless darkness you can't come back from. Maybe Elliot had thought the same thing once. I didn't like it. I was only a couple of feet from the door, but I decided I wouldn't take any chances. I turned to leave, and as I did, the door swung shut. At first, I didn't register what happened. A door closing isn't a big deal. It might be misaligned or there could be a breeze. This wasn't the case here. This door was solid metal. It wouldn't accidentally close on its own. I grabbed the handle and twisted and pulled, but it wouldn't budge. I couldn't even push it down. I'm stuck, I radioed in. The door closed. I can't get it open. Sorry about that. It happens, the operator sighed. Some of the hinges on these things are rusted shut. Stay by the door. Someone will go get you. Keep your flashlight on. I stayed by the door for at least 20 minutes, knocking on it occasionally just to see if anyone would knock back. They didn't. After a while, my flashlight flickered. It was far too soon for the batteries to die. Okay, I'm going dark here, I said. Someone needs to get me out now. They're having trouble finding your door, the operator responded. Far end of the right side hall. Section C past the boiler. That's what you said? That's right. There's no door here. There's an open door frame and something that looks like a closet, but no door. That's impossible. Look, you might have the wrong order. If you went past the boilers, you could be in section C or D. There are parallel corridors. In that case, you can just follow the right-hand wall until you get to the other side. There's another search party already there. Right-hand wall. Other corridor. Got it. I followed their instructions, grasping the dying flashlight. As I got to the seemingly endless tunnel, the light finally gave out. It was pitch black. I could close my eyes, and nothing would change. Being in that kind of darkness is so disorienting. You start to imagine how easy it is to get turned around, to the point where you're wondering if you really are turned around. But I kept my hand on the wall and stuck to the right. Is it far? I asked. I can't hear them. It's a bit of a walk. There should be some functioning pipes running overhead about halfway though, so let me know as soon as you hear running water. I couldn't hear anything but my own breathing reverberating down the hall. But if there was running water down there, I wouldn't miss it for the world. I kept my hand on the smooth concrete wall and continued a step at a time. You have to go slow, as even the slightest shift in elevation can send you crashing face first into the ground. When you're exposed to that kind of prolonged darkness, your head kind of fills in the blanks. You start to imagine what the space around you looks like. It plays tricks on you. For example, I started thinking I was running my hand across wallpaper instead of concrete. It was smooth enough that while walking, you might trick yourself. But if you're just using your fingerprints to see the world, you can imagine yourself in all kinds of places. My childhood home had a rough paper textured wallpaper. It didn't take a huge leap of imagination to pretend I was back there, sneaking up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. I ended up taking my gloves off just to get a better idea of what I was touching. I got to a fork in the road and still hadn't heard any running water. I pulled up the radio and called it in. "There's a split here," I said. "Should I stay right or go straight ahead?" "A split," the operator called back. "There shouldn't be a split." Are you sure?" "Yeah, there's a split. Straight ahead or another right." "Wait," the voice mumbled back. Wait. Don't tell me. Is the ceiling really low?" "Yes." "Why didn't you say so? Oh man, this changes things." I could hear them talking to someone in the background, forgetting to take their hands off the button. Then they returned to me. This is gonna get complicated." Turns out there were 3 other rooms with the same description as mine, and neither of them were in the sections I described. I must have veered off course. I had to walk around to gather data points to identify which of the rooms I was in, but it proved more difficult than they'd imagined. For example, one of the corridors was supposed to lead to a junction, and another would lead to a ceiling grate. However, the room at the end of the corridor was incomplete, meaning we couldn't tell what it was supposed to be. I had to go deeper to figure out where I was. I would occasionally run into ladders, but they led nowhere. There were supposed to be entrances from the street, but these had long since been filled and paved. I still had to climb each one just to make sure they hadn't missed one. The mask on my face felt more and more oppressive, like my body was packed into a box. Despite being able to move my arms around, I could feel this claustrophobic stone building in my chest, hammering a counter tune to my increasing heartbeat. If I listened to it too much, I couldn't breathe. I pushed myself down another corridor, only to stop at a dead end. There was a round hole in the wall, just big enough for someone my size. That's good, the operator assured me. "That means there's space for heating. If my calculations are correct, that means you are in one of these 2 hallways. I need you to go inside." "No way." "It's gonna tilt downward for about 5 feet and either go straight ahead or upward. If it goes upward, you can go straight to the top. I can have someone meet you right then and there. If it goes forward, you have to go ahead, then take a left, and then forward again. That puts you in the same corridor as me. Either way, you have to push through." I put one knee up and traced the edges of the hole. It was too small for me to crawl on all fours. I had to put my torso in and drag myself forward with the palm of my hands. The concrete was so smooth, I couldn't get a grip with my fingers. gloves or no gloves. My gear kept getting snagged on the edges. I stopped to have a drink of water and splashed a little on my face, psyching myself up. 5 feet, then up or forward. That was it. I crawled in, inches at a time. I had to stay calm. If I tried to take a deep breath, I could feel my gear pushing against the walls. It didn't hurt, but it was this constant reminder of how isolated I was. My heart was beating through.
This video was sponsored by Climate Power. I am deeply disturbed by the shooting in Utah. Doug and I send our prayers to Charlie Kirk and his family. Let me be clear, political violence has no place in America. I condemn this act, and we all must work together to ensure this does not lead to more violence. Political violence has no place in this country. Political violence of any kind and against any individual is unacceptable and completely incompatible with American values. But this kind of despicable violence has no place in our democracy. The attack on Charlie Kirk is disgusting, vile, and reprehensible. In the United States of America, we must reject political violence in every form. There is no place in our country for this kind of violence. It must end now. On September 10th, 2025, conservative commentator Charlie Kirk was fatally shot while speaking at an event at Utah Valley University. That makes the assassination of Charlie Kirk the 621st recorded school shooting in the United States since 2000. This is how long you have to scroll down on the Wikipedia page for a list of school shootings in the United States before you reach Charlie's death. It wasn't even the most casualties reported from a school shooting that day. In America, we like to render death invisible. We keep it far away, we assign it a number, a category. We deny its reality by deferring to concepts like war, evil, tragedy. Death is simply an abstraction until death becomes the dead. Until the living use the dead to make death knowable. Why do we know the name Charlie Kirk and not number 621? What else can one say about Charlie Kirk that hasn't been said in every prayer, criticism, condemnation, celebration, eulogy, think piece, tweet, podcast, presidential address, or group chat? For all there is to say about Kirk's life, and we'll get there, few would celebrate anything about Kirk's death. This was a tragedy, not because I want to mourn Charlie's political legacy, but because even as Kirk's political life threatened the lives of marginalized people, his murder threatens the possibility of politics itself. A functioning democracy doesn't really survive the normalization of political violence, nor does a YouTube channel. So let me do the thing. This video is not an endorsement of political violence. I do not argue or believe that Charlie Kirk deserved to die, or that political assassinations are good, or that we must now use violence against political enemies. No. We shouldn't live in a country where political violence is the norm. Democracies work well because they channel conflict into non-violent forms of resistance. Protest, elections, deliberation, political groups, parties, lobbying. Active political violence destroys democracies and hurts vulnerable groups the most. However, there's a difference between political violence as an action and political violence, the idea. In any regime, democratic or otherwise, the idea of political violence performs a crucial political function. And don't take it from me.
When you're founding a new regime, it is not possible to found a new regime without some form of political violence.
America only exists because of political violence. The American Revolution was the necessary precondition for the establishment of the American Constitutional Republic. We are one of many countries founded from a moment of violent uprising. We hope that violence is never necessary again. Yet, we're always haunted by the specter of its eternal possibility. That's part of why, in the United States, not all forms of speech are protected speech. You can't stand in a park and tell everyone to bomb Chipotle for that miserable portion of guac. Sometimes words about violence lead to real violence, but it's not always clear what that means. Would Quentin Tarantino have been held responsible if there was a mass genocide of Bills following the release of Kill Bill? Or sometimes it's possible to say things that don't directly call for violence, but that, say, paint certain groups as fundamentally incompatible with a functioning society. Even if words themselves aren't violence, even if they aren't inciting violence, words can absolutely create the conditions for violence. After the Charlie Kirk shooting, Republicans accused Democrats of doing just that.
That the left needs to tone down the rhetoric and needs to cut this crap out. Somebody's going to get hurt by it. But we cannot tell the American people that one candidate is a fascist.
Maybe someone should have told Charlie.
You're the fascist, Joe Biden.
Now, I could spend hours compiling all of the horrific or hypocritical things that a person or group said in the hopes that it might actually change someone's mind. And frankly, it's not hard to find Charlie Kirk saying something reprehensible.
Of course you should be able to use whips against foreigners that are coming into your country. Why is that controversial?
Wow, awful. Like, sure, we should hold people accountable for the consequences of their rhetoric, but it doesn't really help us understand why he said what he said. Or more importantly, why apparently millions of Americans seem to agree with what he said. When Barry Weiss asked Charlie Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk, about her late husband's controversial statements, Mrs. Kirk responded with something kind of true.
My husband is not to be deteriorated to 2 sentences. He's not. He is a thought leader, and he was brilliant of a man. So that's fine if you want to take words out of his mouth or out of context without the whole thing. But that's the problem.
People aren't just collections of quotes. Politics is more than just language. So what if we were to make a genuine effort to understand Charlie as a person? If Charlie is a thought leader, then why don't we take the time to examine what he actually thought? I've spent the last several months putting together, to the best of my ability, a comprehensive picture of who Charlie Kirk was, or at least what his public political life truly stood for. And while I think it's obvious that Kirk's political work perpetuated prejudice, racism, misogyny, Islamophobia, and of course, hate, I believe that this is an incomplete assessment. Hate is a fickle and fleeting emotion, not a political orientation. Political movements are too complex to run on hate alone. In contemporary American politics, hate is just one part of the engine of an inconceivably rotten machine underlying the right wing's grander project. Contemporary American conservatism is a well-funded and well-organized extremist movement that is, without exaggeration, actively trying to destroy American society as we know it to install an authoritarian Christian oligarchy. Charlie was not just a witness to this, he was an architect. If we trace Charlie Kirk's political journey from Tea Party libertarian to authoritarian Christian nationalist, we find a perfect case study of how, and more importantly, why American conservatism has changed so much in the past 20 years. When liberal political commentators joined the bandwagon in saying that Kirk did politics right, or when Democratic leaders admire his passion and commitment for debate, and they're falling for the bait. Kirk wasn't some right-of-center classical liberal who believed in a robust deliberative democracy. His public debates and online persona were the tip of a carefully crafted iceberg. Charlie Kirk will go down in history as one of the chief architects of American fascism. This video is a comprehensive commentary that covers American conservatism's recent political transformation, with Charlie Kirk's life as our representative case. We'll try to outline a framework for American politics going forward. This video is also a tragic narrative. There's heroes and villains, victories and tragedies, and well, the ending, that's up to you. It all starts with a question.
On July 8, 2025, J.D. Vance, emo prince of millennial fascism, delivered a speech on what he thought to be the most important issue of our time.
So I believe one of the most pressing problems for us to face as statesmen is to redefine the meaning of American citizenship in the 21st century.
Notice how he didn't say clarify or restore or uphold. He said redefine. Vance and his Conservative Party admit that they aren't here to conserve. They're here to offer us a new answer.
What is an American? For years, both conservatives and liberals believed that the answer was self-evident. America's an idea, Jack. America isn't an ethnicity, race, or religion. Everyone agreed that Americans were a people linked only by a shared belief in the Constitution. From Democrats,
America's an idea.
The United States of America is the greatest idea.
to Republicans.
America is the only nation founded on an idea.
Anyone from any corner of the earth can come to live in America and become an American.
Yup. Even the ontologically evil Ronald Reagan understood this.
We draw our people, our strength, from every country and every corner of the world.
But now there's a new generation of conservatives with a different definition of America. These individuals travel under different names. National conservatives, American traditionalists, Christian nationalists, and they're probably radicalizing their local white boy. They argue that America isn't an idea. America is a people, a particular group of people with a shared heritage.
But America is not just an idea. America is a nation. It is a group of people with a common history and a common future. And yes, thank you.
Huh. Wait, which group? What heritage?
It's our heritage, our destiny. We Americans are the sons and daughters of the Christian pilgrims that poured out from Europe's shores to baptize a new world in their ancient faith.
Oh, okay, sure. This isn't gonna end well. Should we be concerned that these people run the government now? Well, yeah, a good chunk of these national conservatives didn't start believing these ideas until recently. One of those people was Charlie Kirk. This was Charlie Kirk in 2019.
America's just a placeholder for timeless ideas. And if you fall too in love with, the specific place and all this, that's not what it is.
And this is what he said less than a month before he died.
America was at its peak when we halted immigration for 40 years and we dropped our foreign-born percentage to its lowest level ever. We have 55 million foreigners in this country. We got to take a step back and say, guys, that you're no longer a nation. You're something else. You're a colony.
Hey, did anyone notice that 55 million number includes any foreign-born person in the United States, whether they be citizens, legal residents, or undocumented? And do you think it ends there? Do you think it ends with targeting immigrants? Today, the target is foreign-born individuals, but maybe tomorrow it's anyone with foreign-born parents. Maybe it won't have anything to do with national origins. Maybe the target will be a certain racial group, sexualities, Democratic voters. How did we get here, and where are we going? If we can understand how someone like Charlie Kirk went from believing in America the idea to America the people, then we'll be able to understand kind of everything. So let's talk about Charlie Kirk.
If you're seeing this, I'm probably dead.
Charlie was raised in an upper-middle-class Republican household in the suburbs of 1990 Chicago. As a Republican kid surrounded by a Democratic voting community, Charlie was destined to be an outcast.
I was a bit of a contrarian right from the beginning. My first vivid memory of issue-oriented discussion was debating a teacher in 6th grade about climate change.
As Charlie tells it, he was the only one willing to stand up to liberal indoctrination.
High school teachers and college professors are incredibly tolerant of other people's views as long as you share their own.
The journalist Kyle Spencer tracked down Charlie's classmates and asked them to recall what Charlie was actually like.
As they remember it, Charlie was often told to pipe down, not so much because of his views, but because he was rude, making the atmosphere inside the classroom unsettling. Despite his later assertions that liberals are dead set on their ideas and intolerant of dissent, classmates said that Charlie had a superiority complex and did not tolerate disagreement.
When Charlie graduated from high school, he didn't immediately start a career in political activism. He wanted to take over the world. In fact, his classmates literally named him most likely to take over the world. No, Charlie wanted greatness. Charlie dreamed of attending West Point Military Academy. Getting into West Point is hard. Charlie did everything he could to become perfect. And even after leading the high school's sports teams, rising the ranks of Boy Scouts, and testing well, West Point told him that it wasn't enough. They rejected him. And what did Charlie have to say about that?
Unfortunately, I was waitlisted, and I eventually lost my spot out to what I felt was a far less qualified applicant in my district that was of a different gender and a different persuasion. You could take it any way you want, but I knew the test scores, I knew the qualifications. I was kind of got the short end of the stick.
Oh, so it was actually affirmative action's fault. Damn you, woke Point. Or maybe it wasn't. Classmates recall that Charlie once told his chemistry teacher that he didn't believe in homework. Now, tell me, does it make sense that such a committed anti-homework rebel should feel entitled to a spot at the most selective military academy in the country? Yet, this is the mythology that Kirk fashioned for himself in his early years. An origin story as a misunderstood libertarian debate prodigy, marginalized for his own genius.
Constantly getting in debates, or as I like to call enlightened conversations with my teachers. And I spent a lot of time out in the hall in high school, especially in economics class, because that's what the left does. They're the most intolerant group of people that you've ever met their entire life.
But the truth is, frankly, a little sad.
I was a minority in my high school, which was really interesting, growing up in kind of that kind of environment.
Here we have a tragic political pathology, an insecure teen isolated from the majority of his peers for being rude and confrontational. It was probably really easy to bully the weird Republican kid who doesn't know how to act around people of color. I mean, wouldn't you?
And I learned so much about different cultures, and honestly, that's really where I got my kind of focus on politics, because I was always naturally conservative, loved America, loved the values that our country stood for, and I never understood why you'd want to deviate from that. And then I found myself trying to convince these ideas to people that had never heard or never met a Republican conservative in their entire life. And I knew people that were in this country illegally. I went to high school with them, all right? So for me, it was a really personal connection.
People like Charlie Kirk often think they're entitled to status and recognition. And when the reality hits them that not everyone is going to cater to that entitlement, that his underpaid teachers and annoyed classmates didn't want to argue about libertarianism during class time, Charlie grew bitter and resentful. But since in the real world, Charlie was a part of a majority in a way his minority classmates never would be, Charlie knew he could find that status and recognition elsewhere. He channeled his resentment into politics in a way that would define his career forever. Freshly rejected from West Point, Kirk decides to take a gap year to get involved in local politics. Libertarianism, with its low-tax, free market, and small government stance, calls to the young Charlie for some reason. Does it make sense that a 17-year-old with no assets, business, or income wants to cut taxes and regulation? In spite of this, the young Charlie joined his local Tea Party. A tea party? Aw, Charlie, is that like a fun little afternoon with your little boyfriends? No, it's more like a nightmarish afternoon with a bunch of divorced uncles. The Tea Party was a fiscally conservative movement funded by oil billionaires masquerading as a popular patriotic uprising. Tea Partiers wanted lower taxes, less government spending, and little to no treading on me. Charlie started as a Tea Party guy through and through. As a teen, he spoke at local gatherings, networked with supporters in the Chicago business community, hoping to get something off the ground.
So here I am on June 5th of 2012, lacking the two things that you really need to succeed in politics: money and connections.
In May of 2012, while delivering a speech at Benedictine University, Charlie found a way in. His speech caught the eye of Bill Montgomery, a retired businessman with a passion for mentoring local conservative youth. Billiam gave Charles a piece of advice.
A really amazing mentor by the name of Bill Montgomery, may he rest in peace, he said, "Charlie, you shouldn't go to college."
Montgomery encouraged Kirk to put his talents to use by starting something of his own. Perhaps a conservative organization that would reach Charlie's generation better than the grand old poopers ever could. Montgomery had the business and marketing experience. Charlie had the young face and energy. They called their project Turning Point USA. Kirk's disciples like to claim that TPUSA started with Charlie pulling up to college campuses and debating his way into stardom.
He started with nothing more than an idea and a folding table.
12 years ago, Charlie walked onto his first college campus. He set up a card table and put up a sign with 3 words: "Big government sucks."
But no, he didn't. He started with the help of a millionaire who had powerful friends. That's not to say that Charlie didn't work hard, but a lot of people work hard. Not everyone has a millionaire mentor. Over the next few months, Charlie and Bill hit the road, traveling to Tea Party gatherings across the Midwest, networking, building connections, and importantly, trying to fund someone to fully finance their message. Soon enough, they found themselves entangled in the Republican Party political machine. Do you ever get the feeling that the Republican Party might just be evil? Oh, I'm sorry, am I being divisive?
I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry.
We have to understand that there's a difference between the diverse group of voters who, for whatever reason, vote Republican, and the Republican establishment, the machine. Study its history, and you'll find that modern American conservatism, yes, including Charlie Kirk's conservatism, is largely the product of a small, insular group of elitists. To understand Charlie Kirk, we have to understand how that happened.
This is Fred C. Koch. He started his career as a chemical engineer for the American oil industry in the 1920s and 30s. After accumulating fabulous wealth, in 1940 he founded an oil firm that would soon be known as Koch Industries. How did Fred do it? Well, sometimes you're just at the right place at the right time. And because of that, sometimes you find yourself in business with the Third Reich and Stalinist Russia. But Fred wasn't a bad guy. In fact, Fred wasn't really a fan. Of Stalinism, that is. He thought the Nazis were actually pretty chill and praised their work ethic. But communism? Well, Fred, a patriotic believer in the American free market, saw communism as the biggest threat to the American way of life. Again, the Nazis were fine though. In 1958, he co-founded the John Birch Society, an anti-communism, anti-big government, and anti-civil rights activist group, because of course he was racist. When Fred passed away in 1967, his sons, Charles and David, inherited not only his vast fortune, but their father's political spirit. But Charlie and Dave weren't satisfied with just quietly funding candidates. They wanted to change American society itself. Soon enough, they would get their wish, but it wasn't going to be easy. What we call fiscal conservatism today, like cutting government spending, cutting welfare, low taxes, for the most part, these ideas have never really been broadly popular in the United States, at least up until recently. While it is true that Americans hate paying taxes, Americans also like the social services that they benefit from. For example, the 2 largest government programs, Medicare and Social Security, have enjoyed consistent public support since their inception. Bitches love post-war liberal welfare states. Even though Americans generally like government programs, they don't always like the government. In 1964, when Americans were asked if they trusted the federal government to do what is right at least most of the time, 77% said yes. But in the next decade or so, that trust fell dramatically. With the failure of Vietnam, civil unrest in the 60s, and finally the Watergate scandal in the early 70s, public trust in government fell to its lowest point, 36%, and it has never truly recovered. With American trust in government so low in the 1970s, libertarians and fiscal conservatives saw an opportunity, which brings us back to the Koch brothers. Throughout the 1970s, the brothers poured billions of dollars into funding, if not founding, institutions that promoted anti-government libertarianism. And the Koch brothers weren't the only ones doing this. Ultra-wealthy conservatives like Richard Scaife, John Olin, the Bradley brothers, most of whom made their fortune in the oil industry, spent billions to transform libertarianism from a fringe idea into an institutionally backed political project. Think tanks, university research centers, conferences, packaged with obscure names like the Cato Institute, the Institute for Humane Studies, the Manhattan Institute, all to hide the fact that they were fronts for the political agenda of a few billionaires. Since most of these were established as nonprofits, they were under no legal obligation to disclose their donors. Money could flow from anywhere, from anyone. This is what's known as dark money.
In the 80s and 90s, these free market, limited government ideas found their way into policy agendas, a trend today known as neoliberalism. Neoliberalism affected all of American politics, but its most extreme and dangerous form found a home in the Republican Party. By the late 2000s and 2010s, right around the time a young Charlie Kirk became politically active, dark money was bigger than ever before, and most of it was going to conservatives. Two important things happened around this time. Possibly life was slower back then. First, in September of 2008, the American financial market collapsed, leaving millions of Americans economically destitute and increasingly skeptical of corporate influence. The second important thing happened a month later, when Americans elected Barack Obama, the Democratic presidential candidate who promised to rein in Wall Street excesses and restore faith in the government. According to my sources, that did not happen.
People were angry. Dark money seized the moment.